Welcome to the Vibrant Visibility Podcast. Being visible as a soul-led business owner isn't just about the practical strategies, marketing tips, and tech systems. It's also about the internal systems, the safety of your nervous system, the somatic connection, and the embodiment of being a badass CEO that will support you in all of the ups and downs of entrepreneurship. And I'm here to share all of that with you on this show. I'm your host, Shawnee Arsenault, a registered nurse turned visibility coach and business mentor for heart-centered coaches and healers. I created a six-figure coaching practice in my first year of business and scaled to multiple six figures my second year, all in the middle of getting pregnant with my first baby and becoming a new mama. If I can do this entrepreneurship thing, I know you can too. If you're ready to learn how to be a CEO in a way that feels aligned with your heart, become a lighthouse for the people that you're meant to serve, feel free to authentically express yourself and be a magnet for success, and grow your coaching business in a way that is sustainable and fulfilling, I can't wait to be in your ear along for the ride. All right, everyone. Welcome back to the Vibrant Visibility Podcast. Okay, I'm coming at you here just a little bit annoyed because I recorded this podcast and it was a 35-minute long session of just straight fire. It was so good. And then I realized that I was either muted or my sound wasn't working. So here we are re-recording. So hopefully this is going to work. Today is a topic that I am really excited to dive into because it's a topic that I've really done a lot of my own inner work with. And I can definitely see this being a big obstacle for a lot of coaches in this particular industry, this particular space. If you have ever felt torn between wanting to create ease and flow and alignment in your business, but also feeling like you want to work a little bit harder. There are places where you are feeling okay with sacrificing a little bit and hustling. This episode is going to be for you. And we're really going to talk about redefining your relationship with hustle. Embracing the work that you love to do and letting go of the guilt surrounding it, letting go of the guilt around wanting to be in your business all the time, and really accepting the fact that hard work is going to be necessary at any stage of business that you're in. And how do we find balance? How do we find a healthy balance of when it's okay, when it feels good to work really hard, and when it feels like too much, when it feels like it's going to burn you out? I used to have such a negative view on what hustle actually meant because I was a nurse in the hospital and I worked night shifts. I worked overtime a lot. I always went in for extra shifts. I grew up believing that the harder you work, the more it's going to pay off, even at the expense of your own health, your own well-being, your own mental well-being. So whenever I got into my business and I started to work late, I started to work on my laptop at night, or whenever I was supposed to be spending time with my son, especially after I became a mom, the guilt of working when I was supposed to be having personal time really set in. And I would come to coaching calls all the time talking about this. I would come to coaching calls talking about how guilty I felt, how much of a terrible mom I felt, how much of a terrible wife I felt like. And the biggest realization that I had to wrap my head around was the acceptance, the perspective that hustle isn't inherently bad, right? It's how we engage with it that matters. There's the perspective that hustle is really bad. It takes you away from your personal relationships. It is unhealthy. There's that side of it. Like if you want balance in your life, hustling is not the way. And I think there can be such a gray area here. You know, I think if you are hustling from a place of excitement or passion, when it's fueled by creativity or inspiration, hustle can be exciting. Hustle can be a good thing. And then it can also be an act of creation, not obligation. That's where I think people fall into this hustle is bad idea, is whenever they are hustling because they feel like they have to. And obviously, this is very specific to entrepreneurs, right? In other areas of life, there may be a different angle for this, but for entrepreneurs specifically coaches, heart-centered coaches that are just wanting to build their business, hustle, I think, is a necessary thing only if it comes from the right place, right? There is this stigma around hustle culture and the rise of anti-hustle culture and the pressure to do business in a relaxed and easy, flowy, rainbows and butterflies way. I mean, it's nice to think about that and to want that. And I just don't think it's realistic. You know what I mean? I think every successful entrepreneur has had to have seasons of hustle in their business regularly. And so I think we can acknowledge the value of balance and the value of taking care of ourselves enough to avoid burnout, but also recognize that those seasons of hustle can be really helpful in the growth of your business and can be an expression of creativity, of determination, of grit, right? So, one of the things that I really love seeing in my clients is their willingness to make their own rules, right? Not fitting into someone else's definition of right or wrong ways of working in your business, of building your business. Because I think that's also something that contributes to hustle culture as well. Like you start a business, you hire a mentor, or you take a course or whatever it is, and then your brain kind of molds to the structure that you're initially taught whenever you start your business. And I think the beauty of being an entrepreneur is that you get to make your own rules. If you want to work, if you like to work, then not making that wrong, not making that bad. I used to do that all the time. I used to really enjoy my work, spend a lot of time on work. I would have my laptop out at night because that's when I feel the most creative. I would take a lot of time and energy and maybe even pull that from other areas of my life and sacrifice other areas of my life because I felt so passionate about what I was doing. And then I would feel so guilty about it because I didn't want to revisit a time in my life where I thought hard work was more important than doing something meaningful. And every time I noticed myself pulling away from my family, from my mom duties, from other stuff in my life to work on my business that I felt excited and passionate about, I would put myself on this guilt trip, right? Of like, I can't believe that I'm letting my business take me away. And that is not an empowering way to look at it. And I could sense that at the time, but I didn't really have like the conscious awareness of it. Now that I'm looking back and after getting support over and over and over again on my coaching calls with my mentor, I can clearly see how the hustle wasn't bad. I was making it bad because of how I thought other people would perceive me. So I get to make my own rules. I like hustle. I have a really good relationship with hustle. And there are times in my business where I think hustle is absolutely necessary, where I think hard work is absolutely necessary. And I get to build that into my business and then ask for the support that I need to kind of help pick up the slack on the other areas of my life that I end up putting less energy towards. I'll give an example of this. For this most recent launch for my group program, Vibrant Visibility, the launch came together very quickly. It was kind of a last minute decision and it was like boom, 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 things were happening. And I had to have a conversation with my husband about, hey, look, this opportunity is presenting itself. I'm going to take it. I know it's going to be a really good move for my business. I know it's going to bring in a lot of income and it's really fulfilling for me. It's something that means a lot to me. I'm passionate about it. But would you be willing to help me in other areas, right? Help me with Beckham, our son, help me with, other things around the house in our home and our family. And he was willing. He was on board, but I had to plan almost to have support through the stage of hustle. And I think the biggest thing about choosing to go into a stage of hustle is that I have full control over it. I think with hustle, people get into this really toxic mindset with it and believe that there are rules around it. How much hustle you should do, how much you shouldn't, and when. But again, like I said earlier, I think there's a beautiful piece of being an entrepreneur that you get to make up your own rules. You get to decide when you want to hustle, when you want to work really hard, when you want to work extra, and when you want to relax. And with the launch that I executed, I was hustling. I was hustling for that first period of the launch. And then towards the middle of the launch, when it was a little bit slower, I started to notice how tiring it was. And I intentionally built in practices that allowed me to rest, that allowed me to kind of reset myself, my nervous system, my energy, my mindset. And I took extra time to take care of myself, to do my journaling, to eat really well, to hydrate, to get sleep, to lean into the support of my mentor, my coach, my therapist, my husband. to foster those connections, to spend more time with my son. And in creating the time in the middle of that launch to kind of unplug from my business and I already had a lot of my marketing scheduled out. I had a lot of my social media posts scheduled out. So I didn't really have to do much other than have the calls that I had scheduled to connect with people who were interested in the program and take care of myself. And that period of rest, that intentional period of rest, knowing how energetically drained I was going to feel towards the end of that first little bit of the launch, helped me gain more momentum and gain energy back so that at the end of the launch, I could come back with this really high energy again, and hustle again. So I think having a strategy for when you hustle and when you don't in your business can be super, super helpful. Now, I want to explore the difference here between hustling because you have to and hustling because you want to, right? The difference between desire and obligation, hustling from desire versus obligation. I think if you can be really real with yourself about what you desire in your business, how much you want to grow, how much money you want to make, what kind of results you want to see, being really honest with what feels doable, what feels attainable to you, so that whenever you work really hard, it doesn't feel like you're trying to create this magical result that seems so far away. You actually feel determined. You actually feel motivated. It feels joyful and meaningful instead of draining, right? So I think it's really, really important to tie the hustling that you do execute to what your true desires are and the desires that feel realistic. My favorite way to do this is, of course, you guys know I'm going to invite you to check in with your body and your emotions, right? Your brain can come up with all of these ways that it wants to hustle, but not all of them have the purest of intentions. Sometimes you might want to hustle because you're solely focused on making money. And there's nothing wrong with that. It just isn't an energetic place that you want to come from if you want to be a heart-centered coach. And you'll be able to feel that. You'll be able to feel if you are hustling from a place of scarcity, of fear, of obligation, or from a place of passion, excitement, creativity, flow. Like, you can still hustle and have it not be such an uncomfortable, bad thing. Whenever I was a nurse working in the hospital, I hustled because I felt like I had to, right? Because my perspective was so chained to the idea of working for somebody else, of clocking in, clocking out, of getting that paycheck based on how many hours I worked. And if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. So I felt obligated to work hard. I felt obligated to hustle. And I did the same thing at the beginning of my business too. Whenever I first started my business, I felt like I had to put in all of these hours and do all of these extra things so that I could make my business be successful faster, so that I could make more money faster, so that I could feel like I was getting somewhere. And so there was a point in my business after probably like the first year and a half where I was so tired and exhausted, and I felt a little bit uninspired. And so I really think that getting clear on where that intention of hustle is coming from, the intention to work hard because it's something you firmly believe in, it's something you're excited about, is so different than hustling to get a result that you may or may not have control over, right? Another big thing here is how do we let go of the judgment around your own work habits? Because this is something that I've definitely had to work through, of letting go of the judgment. I think I talked about this a little bit earlier in the episode, of the mom guilt, judging myself for being on my computer at night or not paying complete attention to my son and being super present with him and being on my phone, right? Like, I think there are things about hustling that we can absolutely judge. If you notice that self-critical voice coming in, how do we release that idea of like, I'm doing it wrong, right? How do we release those thoughts and instead lean into what actually feels right? Whenever I was going through that, especially whenever I first had my son, I wanted so badly to work instead of be around him. And there was a lot of things that contributed to that, but I also started to make it mean that I was a terrible mom because I didn't want to be around my son because I love my work too much, And I really had to accept that this was my reality, right? Motherhood with a newborn is fucking hard. And so I had to wrap my head around it's okay for me to not like this stage of motherhood. It's okay for me to find comfort in working hard in my business. It's okay for me to have a business that I can use as an outlet whenever I'm having a hard time in other areas of my life. Like what a gift. What a gift I've given myself to create a business that is this enjoyable, especially when other things in my life feel like they're falling apart. Right? So lean into what actually feels good without making it wrong, right? Whether that's a slow and steady pace or bursts of, intense creative work. I think it can be so helpful to figure out and identify what actually feels good without the noise of what other people might say, what other people might think. What feels good for you? Sometimes it does feel good for me to do my creative work in my business, especially if I don't feel like I can fully show up as mom. And then the opposite. It feels good for me to let go of my business whenever it's too much or whenever I don't feel totally inspired by it and find excitement in other areas of my life, right? How can we just let go of that judgment? And it doesn't have to be a bad thing. It just gets to be what it is. Another thing that I want to invite here is letting go of the judgment of doing things differently. Right? So I've definitely worked with clients in the past who feel guilty about working in ways that didn't fit like the standard entrepreneurial advice, right? But I think the beautiful thing about being an entrepreneur is that you get to create your own rhythms. You get to notice whenever you do have those bursts of energy, how do I capitalize on this? How do I make this the most efficient use of my energy and time, even if it looks different than the way that another entrepreneur creates success? I think it's worth taking a look at. It's worth evaluating how your own energy responds to different external circumstances, different seasons of life, different seasons of business, and honoring your unique way of doing things. All right, I have some practical tips that I want to give to you guys for any of you who I like to call this heart-centered hustling. For any of those coaches or healers out there who want to hustle in a heart-centered way. And then really just embracing hustle in a healthy, aligned way. And the first one is obviously going to be listen to your body, right? Check in with yourself, notice where that hustle is coming from, if it's coming from a place of fear or scarcity or lack or whatever, or if that hustle is coming from a place of motivation, of drive, of excitement, of passion, of inspiration, of creativity, right? Check in with yourself somatically, notice where you're working. And if you're working from a place of stress or alignment. And if you want a little bit more of a tangible practice for this, I have an awesome worksheet called the Somatic Check-In, and it can just help you break things down from a sense of, where's my mind at? Where are my emotions at? What is my intuition telling me? So I'll link that in the show notes for you guys. The second tip I have for you is to make sure to set boundaries for yourself, right? It's okay to push hard sometimes, but also know when to pull back and rest, right? As I was talking earlier about the launch, I kind of knew. I knew that the beginning of the launch was going to take a lot of energy and time. And then I knew that the end of the launch was going to take a lot of energy and time. And the in between, I intentionally put in places of rest, places of nourishment to help prep me for that high energy time again. Maybe you also need to set a boundary or ask for support from the people in your life, right? Whether that be a coach or a mentor or a colleague, a friend, a partner. Like I said, I had a conversation with my husband about this launch and I asked him for what I needed. Setting boundaries with yourself around social media, around really media consumption in general, TV time. If you feel like unplugged time kind of helps you center yourself and recover from a period of hustle, whatever you need to do, whatever practices you need to put in place to make sure you're taken care of. The next tip I have for you is to give yourself permission to enjoy the hustle, right? If you love working on a big project or knocking things out quickly, own that. Fucking own that. It's part of who you are, and there is nothing bad about wanting to work hard. There's nothing bad about wanting to put a lot of time and energy into this thing. As long as you're not relying on this thing to produce results for you, right? How can we hustle? How can we put in the energy and the work without attaching ourselves to what happens afterwards? Because that that's when we hustle from a place of obligation. That's when we hustle from a place of scarcity, of fear. And we want that hustle to be grounded and centered in excitement, right? So you can put all of your energy and your work and your time into this project and still feel really good about it afterwards, no matter what the result is. And that's kind of what, bringing back to the example of my most recent launch, I knew that if I had only signed maybe one or two clients for this program, the amount of time that I've spent hustling and working really hard and pouring my time and energy and creativity into was not a waste. Because I knew that even just walking one person, two people through this program was going to give me the data that I needed to make the next launch better and easier. Right. So how can we detach ourselves from the outcome, especially if it's a monetary outcome or a numbers outcome? And how can we give ourselves permission to enjoy the fun of the actual work itself, the actual creation of it? And then the last tip I have for you is to honor the seasons, honor the cycles. Some seasons of business may require more hustle and then others may be slower, right? Both are valid, both are okay. And then you're not doing anything wrong if you're leaning into one or the other. I see this all the time, right? And this is especially true if you have a feed full of coaches that are constantly launching things. And like, it's so easy to get spiraled up into the comparison of it all. But I think it can be really important to know that just because somebody else is in this season of hustle, that doesn't put the only person that's putting pressure on you to hustle as well is you, right? Just because you see other people out there doing their thing does not mean you have to meet them there if that's not where you're at. So permission for things to be slower, to honor your cycles, to honor the different phases of business and growth that you are in, all of it is valid. And so just really coming back to center, coming back to what feels true for you, honoring that there are people out there hustling and killing it and whatever. And I am here in this part of my business, in this stage of my business, and it gets to be okay, even if it's slow, even if it's not. So just honoring where you're at. So I have an invitation for you here. I have an invitation for you to start dreaming really big about how you ultimately want to run your business, right? And building a business is ultimately about creating the dream that you have for yourself, right? So if you can take a moment to reflect on what hustle actually looks like for you, how would you define hustle? How would you form a better relationship with hustle? Is it from a place of joy, from creativity? How can you embrace your own unique way of working and working hard without feeling the guilt or pressure? You know, it is important to be working towards a dream that you create for yourself, not someone else's version of success. So if you have a moment here, you know, if you want to pause this episode and write down, what ways are you willing to work hard in your business that feel in alignment, that feel fun, that feel motivating and exciting? And then also maybe on the other side of that page, putting in what you can do to rest after a season of hustle. This is so helpful to have early in your business, because I think whenever you notice that you're in a stage of hustle, you're going to want to have some supportive practices and supportive people and whatnot to nourish yourself again, right? Because seasons of hustle can be energetically draining, and we can choose that, right? I've always been interested in kind of breaking the rules and breaking the norms. So whenever somebody tells me that hustling is bad, I'm sitting there like, I don't think it is. And here's why. I think every entrepreneur has to have a little bit of that like rebellious side to break the rules and to figure out like what actually works for them. So redefining your relationship with hustle. I have come to find that hustle is a beautiful part of my business. Like I said, I really enjoy working hard, and I enjoy building something and using my own pain, my own blood, sweat, and tears to build something out of nothing. I just think that that's such a cool thing that we as humans can do, that we can do when we become entrepreneurs. And also realizing that it doesn't have to be black and white. Hustle doesn't have to be bad. Hustle doesn't have to be good. It can just be what it is. And we can choose the weight of the meaning that we give it, you know? So what did this bring up for you? I am so curious to know what you guys' perspective on hustle is. I know this is not typical of what people think of whenever we think of hustle, but I've really been sitting on this for months. I actually recorded a voice memo with this idea for this podcast several months ago on a walk. And I've just been kind of waiting to bring it here until I felt like I could really clearly verbalize what my thoughts were around it. Because for a while there, I did feel conflicted. I did feel kind of weird about talking about how hustle can be a good thing and how that can be a controversial perspective. So, what came up for you? I'd be so curious to know. My inbox is always open to you guys. If there's anything you want to process, if there's anything inside of this episode that kind of hit a nerve for you, let me know. Let's talk about it. I'm here to support you. I love getting to connect with you guys, and I love getting emails from you guys too. So feel free to email me if anything came up, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If this was helpful for you, subscribe to the show to make sure you're always in the loop when a new episode is out. And I would love to invite you to join me in the free Visibility and Tech Support for Coaches community, where we hang out and chat about all things visibility, tech, systems, and heart-centered business building. I regularly share tips and tutorials and go live every now and then, and it's just nice to be in a community with other like-minded coaches and healers. So you can join this free space at alignwellco.com/community, and I can't wait to see you there.